I think now is okay.
Okay, good.
Okay. Good afternoon, Danny. Good afternoon, Professor Daniel Goleman. It's a big pleasure to be here with you. And good afternoon. First, thank you very much for accepting my invitation to participate in the Second World Congress on facial expression of emotion. With your contribution. We have other contributors like Antonio Damasio and Joseph Ledoux, our colleagues and friends,
Sure.
and among others. But I think, as you know, I like talking to you about emotional intelligence.
Sure.
And I have some questions for you. You can start? Yeah. The first question is,
Well, first of all,
um,
yes,
yeah,
before
yeah,
we
you
do that,
can.
let me express my gratitude for the invitation. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, but I'm happy that we are able to have this conversation, this dialogue. Please, sir, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much. Well, how was your academic and professional journey leading up to the publication of emotional intelligence? What impaired you to focus on this topic?
When I left my teaching position at Harvard, I went into science journalism, which was then a very new field, and I ended up at the New York Times. And at that uh, newspaper, I covered brain and behavioral science, including the work of Antonio Damasio and, of course, of Joseph Ledoux. And uh, there was about 10 years of very important research on emotions in the brain during that period. And so when I wrote the book Emotional Intelligence, I actually hadn't intended to write about emotional intelligence per se. I was thinking to write a book about the brain and emotion. And then Peter Salovey, who's just stepping down as president of Yale University, wrote an article about what he called emotional intelligence. And I thought, that's a fabulous phrase because it sounds counterintuitive. You don't usually, certainly then, put emotions together with intelligence. But he was talking about being intelligent about emotion. And so I wrote my book, Emotional Intelligence, starting out as a look at new findings on the brain and emotion, but then using the model of emotional intelligence as a framework for that.
So, how do you define today the emotional intelligence?
I see emotional intelligence as having four parts: self-awareness, knowing what you're feeling and how that shapes your perceptions, your thoughts, your facial expression, which you're not really aware of, but it tells
Yeah.
other people what you're feeling, and your impulse to act. And then using that, the second part is self-management, emotional self-management, keeping your disturbing emotions under some control and marshaling the positive motivation, the positive feeling that helps you get your goals accomplished and so on. And then there's empathy. There are three kinds of empathy. One is cognitive empathy. AI is very good at cognitive empathy. That's what it's designed for. And but the second kind is emotional empathy. And here I'm not. I think AI is a failure because it doesn't have any emotion. It might be programmed to read emotion from facial expression, perhaps
Yeah.
using the metrics developed by Paul Ekman, who was studying facial expression of emotion for many, many years and came up with formulae actually for different emotions based on what muscles of the face are acting in what way. So a computer can be programmed to read that. They use it in making cartoons now, for example, to get accurate facial expressions for the emotional feeling of a character. So that's the second kind. Third kind, I think, is very important and isn't based on either of the first. That's what's called empathic concern, caring about the other person. I feel this is very important. The fourth part of emotional intelligence is putting that all together to have effective relationships. And I'd like to say, if you can't read facial expression of emotion, to know how the other person feels, because people don't tell us in words, they tell us in such nonverbal cues. If you can't do that, then your relationships may be more difficult for you.
Yeah. And how does emotional intelligence influence professional success? Can you share examples of how
Well,
it can be applied in, for example, in
sure.
organization?
Well, those are two different questions. Let me start with the first.
Yeah,
How does emotional intelligence matter over the course of a career? You know, there's a misperception in our cultures uh, about the importance of IQ. And it's because IQ matters very much during school years when you're having academic training. It's a very good predictor of the complexity of ideas that you can handle. And so while you're in school, your IQ predicts your lifetime income pretty well. But the reason it does that is it predicts whether you can get an advanced degree or not, whether you can get an MBA or a PhD, a doctorate. In order to do that, you have to have a higher IQ than most. However, this is the trick. I remember telling this to people at Google. They were very upset to hear this. People at Google have to be in the top 99% of IQ to get a job there. However, there is a variation among the performance of people at Google. So people at Google want to know, why is this the case? And it's because of the influence of emotional intelligence once you are in a career. So your IQ predicts what kind of career you can get into. Your emotional intelligence predicts how you will perform once you're in that career. Will you emerge as a star performer? Can you manage yourself well? Can you handle relationships well? That all depends on your emotional intelligence. So over the course of a career, uh, emotional intelligence matters more than IQ in success within that career. And many people get confused about that. I think it's very important to understand.
yes, yes. And what is the role of emotional intelligence in educational empowerment? How can schools and universities effectively integrate it into their curricula? How is possible?
Well, I think that it's very possible. I'm an advocate of what's called social emotional learning, which embeds lessons in emotional intelligence from age 5 to kids go to university, and it
Yeah,
does it in a age appropriate way. So you might teach the same lesson about handling your emotions or about what to do when you have a difficult relationship. Uh, and kids tend to love this because it helps them get along with other kids, which is very important to them. So I think that you could see this as workplace preparation or leadership training, but uh, for kids in school, it's just how you have a happier life and how you get along better with your friends. Very important.
yeah. I have more two questions for you because you have not a long time. And emotional intelligence can have a significant impact on mental health. What um, what do you think about that? what you practice do you suggest for development and applying high in the context of mental well-being? What do
Well,
you think about that?
yeah, that's a wonderful question. And I think that emotional intelligence is a particular way of talking about emotional well-being. It's the same thing. If you think about being self-aware, being able to manage your disturbing emotions well, being able to get along with other people, those are all aspects of well-being. So I'd say that emotional intelligence is the same thing as well-being.
You know, some critics argue that EI can be difficult to measure and that it affects our subjectivity. What do you think about
I think that it is difficult to measure emotional intelligence, particularly, for
measure? Yeah,
example, when people are applying for a job. You can measure aspects of it. For example, how well do they read facial expression?
but it's difficult to measure.
But but generally, there's no way, I think, of telling when someone's applying for a job, you want to look your best. And
Yeah,
so use a self-report. People can try to look good in the way they answer those questions. So it's difficult. I think it's better to hire someone conditionally for maybe 6 months, see how
yeah,
they actually are, what their chemistry is with other people in their position, how well they do that position, and then to train people for aspects of emotional intelligence that they need help in.
yeah.
Empathy might be managing disturbing emotion. And there's a very good framework for that. I have a course, the Daniel Goleman Emotional Intelligence course. It's online. It's in Espanol and not in Portuguese. It's
Yeah.
Espanol. And
Who know in the next week, you next time, next month, or you next year? Why not?
yes, but perhaps so. Anyway, Daniel Goleman Emotional Intelligence. That's one long word. You can
Yeah, I know.
look online for it. There's also something called the Emotional and Social Competence Inventory, which is used in emotional intelligence development for leaders, top executives particularly, where people ask other people who know them well, whose opinions they trust, to rate them on specifics of emotional intelligence. And they get a
Yeah.
baseline, they get a profile, what they're good at, what they need work on, and then they work with a coach, for example. And then at the end of that time, they can see how other people rate them to see what their improvement is. I think that's important.
Yeah, and I think it's possible to do a relationship with the emotional intelligence and facial intelligence, you know. I think it's possible to do.
Yes, I think that you can get metrics for these. Uh, for example, someone may be very good at reading facial expression. They may not be
Yeah.
so good at managing their own emotion. Those are two different abilities. So you need to know where is their strength, where is their limitation. And one thing is that's important. This matters for the workplace immensely. There's a study in my new book, Optimal. I describe a study done at
Yeah.
business school where people they kept a journal of their experience during the day at work. And more than 1,000 of those journals were analyzed, and they came up with a optimal state where people performed at their best. They felt good about what they were doing. They're satisfied with their position. They're in a good mood. They feel connected to other people. And then it turns out that, for example, the different markers of this, like engagement, uh, are enhanced if you have a leader, a boss who's emotionally intelligent. Emotional intelligence helps people get into that optimal state for performance. And I think companies, organizations need to pay attention to this.
By the way, your last book is emotional book. It's a code book. Okay. Now, I think it's important to talk to you about the artificial intelligence. In the age of artificial intelligence, do you believe it's possible to program machines to be emotional intelligent? What are the major challenges, risks of this integration? What do you think about?
I think it's very difficult to program a machine to be emotionally intelligent because machines have no emotion. They can't be self-aware of emotion. They don't have emotion. They can't manage disturbing emotion. They don't have them in the first place. Can they mimic emotional intelligence? Absolutely. They can seem to be emotionally intelligent if you can figure out what an emotionally intelligent person is like, and you can program a machine that way, then I think theoretically it's definitely possible. And also, I wouldn't trust it for a minute.
Okay, the last question
That's
for
nothing.
you. Yeah, yeah. The future of emotional intelligence. How do you see the future of emotional intelligence
Well,
in the coming decades?
right. Because the human brain is so complex and is the basis of emotional intelligence, I actually don't think AI ever is going to replace it. I think we'll always need people where it counts. We'll need people as top executives to make decision. We'll need people as leaders to inspire the best work out of people. We'll need people as caretakers. We'll need people as therapists. So I think there will always be a role for human qualities, for human abilities. And I don't think that a machine can actually have those abilities. It might seem to, but it's just fooling us. It doesn't really.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Danny. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay.
And thank you for coming to Porto. And thank you for your faith. Be well, Danny. Thank
Pleasure.
you.
Thank you,
So
sir.
nice.
Bye.
Bye bye. Okay, Danny.